Hi, everybody. I'm back and I'm here, and I have a special guest for you in the first episode back since whatever it was I went through. But our first interview, the interview chair, is the Honorable David Merriam. And I really want you guys to listen to this because there is some great information there that you all need to hear. So sit back and listen to David. Hi, everybody. Will here. We're back. And today we have in the interview chair the Honorable David Merriam. How are you, David?
It's fine, Will.
It's good to see you. We tried earlier. We couldn't get the camera working, but now I can see you plain as day, so it's perfect. How's
That's
the
good.
weather out there?
Well, it's pretty good. It was 52 this morning on the deck about 5 o'clock, and it'll go up to about 82 today.
Oh,
Clear
wow.
skies, pretty nice.
Well, that's beautiful. It's nice here today, but it's getting chilly. It's starting to get chilly. There's a chill in the air now, so winter is coming, and we can't avoid it up here. So
Well, we don't mind it at all down here in Southern California.
I'm sure. All right. Well, let's get started. Can you tell me how you first got started in the world of dogs, David?
I was always in the world of dogs, in that the family always had a dog. The first dogs that the family had, however, were just mixed dogs. One was a partly cocker, and the other one was a partly fox terrier. But I really got started out when I was maybe 10 or 12, and I had a tricolored collie called Susie that I didn't know how I got her or why I got her, but we were in Southern California by that time, and I took Susie to some obedience classes put on by Bill Keeler, who was a fairly well-known dog trainer out here and did some film work. But anyway, I went through obedience with Susie. She was not as enthused about it as I was. And so I didn't do very well with her. But about that time, I got interested in purebred dogs, and I began getting rides to dog shows with a retired colonel. His name was Colonel James Marr, who had a kennel full of really fine bull terriers. And as it would be, after a year or so, he gave me one, white bitch, by the name of Gigi. And I got Gigi when she was about 6 months old, I guess. And when she was 11 months old, with me handling, she won the largest bull terrier specialty in the country.
Wow. And how old were you when you were showing her?
I was about 14, I think. My dates and ages are little estimates at this time. But anyway, she won this wonderful specialty in a great silver pot. And obviously, I was hooked over there. So my transition from collies to bull terriers doesn't seem to be a normal transition, but it was based on the premise that it's more fun to win than it is to just to lose.
Oh, that's for sure.
And I've been in bull terriers ever since. That was in about 1953, I guess, 53 or 54.
Now, did you breed this bitch, the one you won the specialty with? Did you eventually breed her to somebody and have a litter?
Rather had a litter. I don't think there was anything remarkable in the litter, but I showed her a fair amount, and then I started to concentrate a little more on school.
Oh, of course. But did you keep your fingers in the dogs even while you were in school?
Well, I did. I was when I was in law school, I was president of the Golden State Bull Terrier Club as a side, and I guess so. I started both in the dog show world and also in the governance part of the sport, and I followed both of those for a very long time.
Well, I don't want to jump ahead that fast. Tell me how this progressed, because your work with the AKC and your work with the Bull Terriers, and I'd like to know all that, David.
Well, I don't know. I've probably forgotten a good part.
I doubt it.
In any event, I obviously graduated from high school and then went to a private school nearby called Claremont Men's College, which now is called Claremont McKenna College. And I did pretty well there, and I was showing during that period, but not very much. And I graduated from Claremont in about, I think, 1960, and graduated cum laude, and then went up to Stanford for some graduate work. I won a fellowship up there. And so I spent a year up there and got my master's degree in 1 year, actually. And then I went in the Army, where I had some service obligation. I had ROTC in college. And I decided after that I didn't want to continue the academic career, which I had planned on, college teaching. And so I left Stanford and shortly thereafter enrolled in law school at UCLA. And I was getting pretty fed up with education at that time, but I graduated on a sort of accelerated course, 2.5 years. And then decided that I was going to get serious about this dog thing. So I took my grand tour of Europe, which wasn't very grand, I must say. But in the end, I ended up at the home of Raymond Oppenheimer.
Oh, okay.
And we developed a good and long-term friendship. He was a remarkable man and a very generous man. And so I came back from that with a bitch in. Well,
can you, before you carry on, can you just explain to everybody who Mr. Oppenheimer was?
Well, Raymond Oppenheimer was a remarkable man. He was from the Oppenheimer family, which was responsible for a great deal of the development of diamond mines and gold mines in South Africa. And they had a business office in London as well. And Raymond, after the Second World War, had a decision as to whether he was going to go into the diamond trading company in London or spend the rest of his life playing golf. He was a terrific amateur golfer, or raise bull terriers. And it's a pretty difficult decision to make, I must say, but he chose for the latter, and he became the icon of bull terrier breeders, and dominated the breed in England and around the world. He indeed for a good while. He was a terrific breeder. He had a kennel manager by the name of Eva Wetherill, who was equally superb in breeding and raising and training the bull terriers. So they made a great pair.
And what was the kennel name?
His kennel name was Ormandy, and she had a kennel name called Superlative.
Okay.
So during that period, there were any number of dogs called Ormandy, Superlative, Jack-a-dandy, and it goes on from there.
So you met up with him, and did he give you a dog to carry on in America with?
He didn't really. He sort of steered me around, and he gave me a couple of dogs, I would say, and I picked one up also from a friend of his that was in this country, Jim Lewis, who had a dog called Ormandy's Burson's Bounty. And Jim was a fairly wealthy chap. His family was part of the Champion Spark Plugs company. But anyway, Jim, I guess, got tired of the dog and gave it to me. And so that was my first Ormandy dog that I had, and I showed it quite a bit.
And where did you go from there? Did you start breeding yourself then and develop your own line?
Well, I did. It was I really intensively bred for about 10 years from the time I got back from Europe after law school. Of course, I had passed the bar and was working then as a deputy district attorney in my hometown. And I bred a good number of litters then and had a fair amount of success. I was always handling myself, which was, I was an adequate handler, but certainly not a great handler, as my critics would verify. But I picked up a couple best in shows and a fair number of group placements. But in many breeds, the real wins, the real competitions are in the breed specialties.
Oh, for sure.
I did really well there.
So how did we discussed, I guess it was last week, we just discussed Silverwood. How did that get started?
Well, Silverwood was copied by a competition in England called the Regent Trophy. And that goes back to roughly the late 1930s. And it was a invitational event. There was a committee that invited what they thought were the top 6 or 7 dogs in England to compete at this annual event. And they chose both best white dog, best dog and best bitch first, and then they combined those, and there was a runoff. Of course, there in England, and indeed in every other country in the world except the United States, coloreds and whites are shown together. And there's a long historical reason why that's so, and maybe we'll have time to get into it later on.
Well, I'd be curious. I'd like to know why. It's
well, it was when the breed was sort of beginning to thrive over here in the 1920s and the 1930s. There were only white bull terriers over here, and so the breeders got used to only breeding white bull terriers. and they thought they called pure for white. Of course, genetically now we know that isn't so. They carry a recessive color factor. But anyway, they happened, however, to a chap, a rebel, imported a colored bull terrier, and the breeders over here were horrified. They just thought it was awful. And the leader of the pack in decrying the colors was Billy Kendrick.
Oh, okay.
Now Billy Kendrick's uncle had a kennel in Philadelphia, and the Kendrick family was reasonably well off. And after the uncle died, Billy sort of inherited the kennel, and he led the cry, saying the coloreds were nothing but mutts and would only destroy the bull terrier breed, and so they refused to accept it. Well, AKC had a different view of that, and they said no, they're accepted everywhere else in the world. There's no reason why you can't accept it. And the white bull terrier people said, no way, we'll never accept it. And so finally it came down to AKC saying, well, either you accept the colors or we're going to drop you as a member of AKC. And so that was sort of a dire threat. And what finally happened is that the AKC recognized the colors, but it was a period in which AKC, as you know, they go through various changes in policy. But at that time, they were accepting varieties within a breed. And so they made the coloreds a variety within the bull terrier breed, so that you could interbreed the white and the colored, and it would not be a violation of AKC's purebred rules. And it's been that way ever since. When we've tried at times to get rid of that absurdity with a vote of the parent club, it was a bloodbath, and it's never been able to be changed. So
in the country of origin, it's one breed, but here it's two.
And in every other country in the world where there are bull terriers, it's one breed.
Even up here, it's one breed.
Here it's one breed, but it's two varieties that at any show, any all-breed show, don't compete against each other. Now, in terms of the best of variety of white, best variety colored, they do compete at an independent specialty, and you have one best of breed there. But otherwise, you just at a regular show, you just have a best of variety.
You have two dogs competing in the group level, just like the dachshunds and whatnot, I suppose. Then.
Yeah, I mean, when you start handing out prizes and ribbons and what have you, it's very difficult to change the rules to reduce the number of prizes and ribbons that are given out.
Right. People like prizes. Well, so when did you get involved with Silverwood?
Well, from the very beginning.
And what year was that?
Oh dear, let's see. In 2015, we had our 50th anniversary of Silverwood. And
so 65 then.
Not quick enough to but anyway, I was one of the three judges at the very first Silverwood. And the structure of Silverwood is that we bring the dogs in. We do divide them by color there. We first judge a preliminary round, And by we, I mean there are two judges that judge any class. And if they agree, then that's the winner. If they don't agree, there's a referee who comes in and judges between the two that the judges couldn't agree on. And then that one is chosen for the best of that class. And we do that for colored dogs, white dogs, colored bitches, white bitches. And in those preliminary classes, the judges can pick up to 4 or 5, depending on the size of the class, that they want to go on to competition in the afternoon. And so then in the afternoon, and we have a sort of a quirky rule that in the morning, the judges are not permitted to converse with each other. It's really hard to enforce that because they always want us to say something that seems like
Sure.
even if it's about the weather. I mean, the spectators can't tell what they're talking about. But anyway, but in the afternoon they can converse, and so it tends to go a little bit better. The stronger judges tend to prevail in the afternoon, and so we end up with a variety of prizes for the Silverwood Trophy, which is the best bull terrier of the day. There, and then there's a runner-up, the best opposite sex, and best opposite variety, and best mover, and it goes on and on. But it's clearly the premier competition in bull terriers here in the States.
What's the average entry of the Silverwood?
Well, it's usually not very big. Back at the very first, there were probably not more than maybe about 20, I would say. And it's entry by qualification, and that's changed dramatically over the years. It used to be that if you were, one time was if you were just an American champion, you could enter, and then they've done away with that. And so they have had various types of qualifications. We had our Silverwood a couple weeks ago in a little town in Tennessee called Kingsport, which I had to go to the map to find out where it was.
Yeah, I have no idea. Wow.
But the Silverwood itself had something like, I guess it was probably close to 40 or 50 in the Silverwood. And then we have what's our real national specialty the next day. Silverwood's on a Saturday and Silverwood's on a Saturday, and the national specialty is on Sunday. And this year, our national specialty had an entry of 130. And that's startling when you think of bull terrier entries.
Yeah, oh gosh.
Country. It's a breed that's gone dramatically inward toward breeder judges and toward shows that we call what are we? I'm lost for just a moment. Anyway, ones that are judged by approved BTCA judges, and those generally amount to specialty.
Right. Isn't there there's a limited number of judges that are qualified to judge these specialties?
Yes, at least in theory. So
in theory, yeah, because I remember this past year at Westminster when Patty Keenan judged, and she talked about the commentators talked about Patty being one of the few that were qualified to judge at the, I guess,
yeah, yeah, very few.
How do you get qualified for that? Is it voted or?
It gets approved by the board of directors of the BTCA. But you're right, and it's only been within the last few years that we've had non-bull terrier breeders as judges. And now I think we have maybe 5, at the most 6, maybe 4. But in any event, I mean, it's a small enough group, but they can only judge a couple of these shows a year.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if they do a bad job, they don't get it. I mean, it's an area where there is some accountability for a judge.
We
I've
need
often
that.
I've often thought that's one of the more errors or faults in our sport, is that for the most part, our judges don't have accountability. In other words, I could judge Airedales in Seattle and do a god-awful job, and yet 2 months later I could judge Airedale in Florida, and it wouldn't make any difference. I mean, they would still enter because the locals enter.
It's a hard thing. It's to institute that across the country, because not enough people are aware, and it's such a subjective sport. Some people don't understand who does a good job and who does a poor job. So,
well, I think the greatest weakness in judging, and where most of the mistakes are made, is the inability of the judge to understand breed type. And in my mind, breed type, you can pick out in any breed the 3, 4, 5, at the very most 6 physical characteristics that are essential to that breed being an outstanding dog of that breed. And when you go into bull terriers, the first thing you want to look at is head, and then you break that down to maybe 2 or 3, or the most 4 characteristics: profile, fill, eyes, expression, which includes, of course, eyes, ears, and the length of the muzzle in front of the eye. Right? You wanted that longer than the back of the eye. And some basic proportion, and you look at those things first. And if you don't understand breed type, then you go in there and you just put up the soundest dog, regardless. I mean,
right,
happens
a lot.
Doesn't have a dip in the back. It looks to me as I've got a strong head. I don't know whether it's any good, but it's a strong head. And for many, many years, the breed suffered because of that kind of judging.
Yeah, it got very generic.
Yep. And you can't you can't move a breed along without recognizing breed type in judging and in breeding. I mean, it's the breeder's got to make the same intelligent evaluation, always considering breed type as primary.
And it's a hard thing to teach some people breed type, because I think unless they already have an eye, it's hard for them to realize what it is. I get a lot of people calling me, and they'll complain about certain dog shows, and they don't want to show to certain judges. And I said, that's the only way you can make a statement, is if you don't show to them. But if you continue showing to them, they're just going to keep making the same mistakes. But he said, well, what about education? You can educate people all you want. It's up to the individual to receive that education. Like they go in there and just check a box and say they were there. It's not the same. So,
but breed type has got to be learned. I mean, we use rather casually the term eye for a dog, but there's no eye that tells you what's exactly right in a Dandy Denmark versus a German Shepherd. You've got to learn what the really important physical characteristics are of those breeds, and essential. That we call breed, or what I call breed type. And you're right. I think it's very difficult for a judge to learn and to retain and to judge by the breed type in a whole group, let alone 200 breeds in all best in show, and it's almost impossible. I mean, if you ask, if we had oral critiques after every judging, and you ask the judge to say why he or she did this, it would expose a great deal of lack of knowledge of breed type or recognition of breed type.
Right. Either way, it depends on the individual. Again, I remember talking to Luke Ballou about this one time, and he basically told me there was really no such thing as an all-breed judge. We can't know everything. So.
No, absolutely right. That's why for many, many years, although I was approved by AKC to judge best in show, I didn't. And I only went as far to get the acceptance for judging the terrier group. I got all the terriers. And then there was, I don't know, 22 terriers or something like that. And even then, there were breeds that I was a little, not the best one.
But you've been exposed to dogs your entire life, so you definitely have that advantage. Whereas you see some of these newcomers that have been in dogs 10 years, they don't have that. They go out there and, like you said, they pick the soundest dog. So.
And AKC goes through how many variations of judge approval. It's settled down a little bit now, but I mean, they approve entire groups for a judge. It just, I think it's not possible. As you know, the only show I ever judged best in show was at Westminster in 2015. And
I'm sure glad you did.
You may recall that. And when you can either rely on my ignorance or my knowledge for picking the right dog.
So that was your first best in show, and I was glad to be there, and it was a thrill of a lifetime, that's for sure. So.
It was my only best in show. I've never judged one before, and I've never judged one afterward. And I think that'll be a claim, if it's a claim at all, that is probably not matched by anyone else. The only best in show was the Westminster best in show.
Well, you had an excellent lineup to choose from that night, that's for sure. So.
Oh, it was a terrific lineup. But they always say that. They say, oh, it's a great lineup, what have you. But you just, I can almost see the lineup now. But I mean, I couldn't have gone down that lineup and said, here are the 5 most important characteristics of type of this breed. I probably couldn't do that. In fact, at one time I made a suggestion when I was doing some columns for Dog News. I said, how about after best in show that we take the judge, the AKC rep takes the judge after the judge judges best in show and gives him or her the breed standard test for that breed. And if the judge passed it, the win stands. If the judge failed it, the win is withdrawn.
Wow.
And I said no one would object to that, because certainly no good sportsman wants to win under an incompetent judge. This was not received well by the sport or by anybody else.
I'm sure. But could you imagine if they had to do that? That would be an eye opener, that's for sure. So
Would have half of our best in show
taken away. Oh gosh. So, what about the political side of it, and for AKC and yourself?
Well, I got involved in governance early on with the Golden State Bull Terrier Club, which, as I indicated before, I was president of the club while I was in law school, and then I gradually got involved with the Bull Terrier Club of America, and at one time or another, I was either president or a vice president or an AKC rep for years. So I was always had my finger in the governance part. And then in about, let me look at my notes here just so I get it right. In about 1979, Jack LaFleur, who was then the chairman, the president. No, he was on the board at that time. He had been the president of AKC. But I got acquainted with Jack LaFleur. I forget how. But anyway, he arranged that the next vacancy on the AKC board, that I would get appointed to it. And that did happen in the 79. I was then, I think, about 40 or 41, and the next oldest person was about 60 or 65. So I was the young kid on the block, without question. And I served from 79 to about 85, and then I resigned. And I resigned because nothing was happening. I mean, the board was just a rubber stamp for the established president and what have you. And I was on the bench by that time. And then I spent all my vacation time flying from California to New York for worthless meetings. So I quit. And then I don't know why it came about, but in 94 or 92, go back on the board. So I put my name in and got elected to the board. And then in 94, I was elected chairman of the board. Actually, what had happened, and so we managed a coup at a September annual meeting, and she was ousted, and I was elected as an interim CEO for 6 months, which was interesting because I had by that time retired from the bench and had planned to work at a great degree after that. But I went back to New York, and for 6 months I administered AKC. At least we got by. And then we elected a regular president, and I went back on the board. And in one meeting, I resigned as CEO. I was elected to the board 10 minutes at the period. And so I served as chairman of the AKC board for about 5 years, and had as my vice chairman Ron Menaker. And I decided that 5 years was enough to be chairman. And so I stepped down as chairman, but Ron coerced me to remain on the board as vice chairman. And so I stayed as vice chairman for about 8 years and then retired completely from the board in '09 in Huff. I didn't resign. I think I termed out. But that time that the AKC board was so constituted that they wanted to get into the non-purebred aspect. And so they developed this system of quasi-registration or recognition of non-purebreds for agility and obedience. I think it was a mistake then. I think it's a mistake now. Because I really think it actually, the sport's done reasonably well in spite of that, because still the dominant thing is purebred dogs. But you go to a show now and you see a strange-looking dog walking around, and you wonder whether it's one of these non-purebred dogs that's in agility, or it's some breed that AKC has just recognized that you can't pronounce the name and you don't even remember what country it's from.
Well, we're getting a lot of those now. I've got a double take, and I've got to ask the person what breed it is, and I feel foolish, but
yeah, precisely.
But it's I guess the whole thing of the non-purebreds is to hopefully get that person with a non-purebred to eventually get into purebreds. But
yeah, I don't know whether that works or not.
Yeah.
The really important part of AKC and the sport is the breeding aspect. And no one's been able to convince me, or even try to convince me if they thought it worthwhile, to say that is there any kind of breeding that's done in the let's say agility, in the purebred, in breeding winners or top winners of agility dogs, a top winner to another top winner, even though it's one's a border collie and one's a Sheltie, breeding those two together to produce a functionally good agility dog. I don't know that that's done. I think that the people in agility, they look to a certain number of breeds that have been successful, such as border collies and such as Sheltie, and they just pick out of a litter characteristics that they think go to making a good agility dog. And they could care less what it's about. The traditional AKC with the traditional breed competition and the field trial work, which is very much based on breeding. And I keep those separate, and then have all of the fun sport in another one. I mean, I have nothing wrong with people enjoying with their dog doing whatever. Doing agility, jumping off into water. Trick with AKC decided I just that's got to be the year.
I hate to say it. It almost sounds just like a money grab, but
well, it is.
No.
But the sport, the sport has such deep roots in the breeding and exhibiting and judging aspect that it's survived thus far anyway. Because now, you go to a show, even with a handicap of having so many shows, so that the entries are reduced considerably, so that at one time the median entry for an AKC All-Breed show was somewhere up around 900 to 1,000. Now I think it's closer to 500 to 600. If there were 700 dogs, if you had 50 or 60 in the entire terrier group, you were lucky, which maybe meant that you had 3 or 4 per breed, which means that in a group you had, out of the potential of 28 to 29, you have 15. It's no fun just handing out ribbons.
Right. Yeah, it's getting that way everywhere. It's been that way up here for a while, and I look down there and you see entries of 250 dogs at some shows, and you think, what happened? And there's just, again, talking to Wayne, it goes back to just being so many dog shows, and you'll look at a certain dog, and that dog will be entered in 5 different shows that same day. You know, it's
yeah. The other aspect that the sport has changed, at least during my span of it, and there's always been people with money in the sport. I mean, way back in the 10s and 20s, in that period, there were people with a good deal of money, but they spent their money supporting kennels. They had their own breeding kennels. They had their kennel manager, who was really the breeder, and they produced their own dogs to show. Today, they don't do that anymore.
No.
The person who wants to spend money contacts a handler and says, "Give me a dog. I don't care, any breed. Give me a dog. We'll line up the money. One that'll win, and it's probably a good dog, and we'll pour the money into it." And the shocking fact that these people who have the money, they spend to campaign a dog. Well, you probably won't. You know this better than I do. They can spend up to $500,000 and $600,000 a year to campaign that dog. And like I said, they'll enter it in 5 shows every weekend, talk with other handlers, see where they're going, and see what their best chances are, and they go there. And that doesn't help a breed. No. Because the number of times that these great multiple best in show winners are superior dams or sires is not that often.
You know, the days of the big kennel operations are gone. Like we miss out on, like you think of some of the great dogs Sylvia Hammerstone produced, Julia Gasso produced, all these dogs, and there was that family of dogs that we could follow throughout the generations. You don't have those anymore. So it's clearly changed. When I did my Westminster gig, the only thing I committed myself to was to say, I'm going to disregard, to the extent that I knew it, disregard the record of any of the 7 dogs in the ring, and try and judge them as they were in the ring, as if they'd never been shown before. Now, whether or not I accomplished it, I don't know. That's up to debate, I guess, but I agree with you.
Because the criticism I got after that judging was that, oh my God, he overlooked dogs that had 200 best in shows or 150 best in shows, and he put up one that only had 15 best in shows. That criticize me for that, but that's not the way to judge. If you're going to judge that way, you don't need to hold the show. You just say, send me the record, and we'll put up the one that's won the most. That's not very dramatic, though.
And it's hard because you can see that happening when you look at today with social media. You can look at the first day of a 3-day or a 4-day dog show, and you can tell not so much the insecure judges, but judges that aren't sure themselves. They'll check what happened the day before because it's so easy to check now because it's all online, and then it just follows down the line, and it's unfortunate because some good dogs show up on the Saturday or Sunday just for those days, and they get overlooked because let's face it, if you win the first day, it tends to roll into the whole weekend. So,
But in spite of all of these handicaps, there's still some very good dogs being bred these days.
oh my God, yes.
You look at a decent show, one where there's a reasonable amount of competition, at least 1,200 or 13 or 1,500 dogs. And you look at the top ones in the group, and the best in show lineup always is very, very, very presentable.
Oh, very deep. I was in the hospital for 2 months, so I got to watch a lot of best in shows online, and it was hard not to find a best show that it wasn't competitive. There was always a competitive dog show, no matter where I looked. I went from Newfoundland all the way to California. I watched best in shows, and
many of
seven good
those
dogs
are being bred by not a big kennel. They're being bred by very competent breeders with all the handicaps that the small competent breeder has in terms of how many dogs they can maintain. I mean, they can't have a kennel of 25 dogs, obviously. So they've got a few bitches that they try and keep themselves, and then they go into the great problem of co-ownership, and that's all filled with risk and pitfalls.
Yeah.
And yet they're producing some good dogs.
Yeah, and it's easy to follow. You can see the families of certain breeds, and I always enjoy. I watched the Gordon Center National, and you could pick out families of dogs at the Gordon Center National. It was fun.
Yeah.
So what's next for David Merriam?
Well, I'm at an age now where I'm 86 now, Will, and 86 is no charm, let me tell you.
Hey, you look great.
Well, I keep my finger in the pot a little bit, but I try not to join any committees, either on the breed or otherwise. And I just am a spectator and an observer.
So you have nothing to do with Silverwood? Would you?
No, I don't. I judged the last time I judged Silverwood was the 50th, and I thought that was kind of an achievement to judge the first one, and then 50 years later to judge it again. I go to every Silverwood, and but I up until a year ago I had a bull terrier, but I don't now. She died, and I'm not going to get another one because of my age. I'm not prepared to leave the dog at 4 years old or 5 years old.
So hard to be without a dog, though. My dogs were away for a while, and I just got one of them back, and it's been great to have them back.
It's wonderful to have one in the house. But if you travel, and I still am able to do a fair amount of traveling, it's a problem.
Oh, it's definitely a problem. I have 3 different dog babysitters I have to drop dogs off to when I go off somewhere. So it's a lot. It's a lot. So you said you were just at a show a few weeks ago as well as a spectator?
Yeah, we had our Silverwood at our national specialty in a little town called Kingsport, Tennessee, which is about 75 miles north of Asheville. Fortunately, they were not in the path of the hurricane, and it was a good show. I enjoyed it.
And now does Silverwood stay on basically the same dates every year, or does it just bounce around?
It stays about the same. It's generally the second or third weekend in October, and it does bounce around the country. It's going to be out in Palm Springs this next October in 2025, and it won't have as many as they had back in the Midwest or the East. You know, it's a strange thing, and I attribute it to the jet stream, but it's easy for Westerners to fly east to show their dog. It seems to be more difficult for Easterners to fly west to show their dog.
Now, why do you think that is?
They don't want to spend the money to fly all the way to California. That's why. Where if it's in the Midwest or the East, they can drive even if it's in an 8-hour drive.
Oh yeah, 8 hours is nothing to a dog show person. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But if it's 2 days or 3 days, that's a little more difficult in traveling. Right. Yeah. Taking dogs on airplanes now, I'm told, is a hassle. I mean, we used to do it with a plane. We'd take maybe 2 or 3 dogs on a plane.
Yeah, I remember going with one time. We would take 10 dogs on a plane. You can't do that anymore. Gosh.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah, crazy. So I have one more question, and I always ask this question to everybody. If you were to meet the 20-year-old David Merriam now, is there any advice you'd give him?
Yeah, I would just give them to if you get into the sport, however you get into it, you just accidentally fall into it, or you're lured into it, or you're coerced into it by wanting to buy just a pet. And when I was without a bull terrier for a little while, and then I said, well, someone convinced me, well, this was quite a few years ago. You really should have one. I said, well, yeah, I suppose so. And I'd go to some of our top breeders, and I'd say, I really want a bull terrier now, and I really want a good one, because I'm used to being around good bull terriers. And they say, well, you willing to show it? Well, I'm not really interested in showing anymore. I'm getting up for age. You willing to breed it? Well, I'm not really interested in having any more litters. And you could see, why would they give up a really good bull terrier to someone like that, who won't move their breeding program along?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
They rightfully shouldn't, because the problem breeders have is they sell a dog that's a pet, and it turns out to be a terrific one, and the owner says, oh, I don't want to go to dog show. I don't want to breed, and I don't want to give her up for 3 months or so for you to take her back and breed her. I just want her, she's our house pet. So you've got those fellows, but I often said to someone a 4-point maxim, if I can remember the maxim, and that is, I said, if you are involved in the sport, don't expect to be thanked or praised. You may be, but don't expect it, because it may not. Don't expect that what you do or accomplish will remain, because your successor will most likely change it. And I forgot whether it's the third or fourth or the last one, and that is that don't do it unless you think that at the time you're enjoying it, and you think it may have some good result. And keep those in mind as you get involved with the sport. It's an enjoyment thing. The more you commit to it, the more you'll enjoy it. But realize that it's a transitional thing, that things change. And
Constantly.
as a person who's 86, I don't like change anymore. but it's a Buddhist. I'm not a Buddhist, but it's a Buddhist principle that things change, and they certainly do.
That's great. That's good advice, though. Well, thank you, David. I'm glad we finally got this together and did this because it was great. You could keep talking, but I'll get in trouble while you keep talking. So
yeah, well, I'll probably start gibberish if I haven't already entered into it already.
Oh no, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to hear all those stories and the backgrounds. It was great. So what do you have planned for the next couple of weeks? Anything exciting? Are you going to a show?
No, I don't go to very many shows. I go to a few specialties. I go to Santa Barbara. We usually have a good. I usually only go to a show that has a good bull terrier entry. Okay. So I try and keep a finger on how the breed is doing, and the breed is doing rather well. I must say, there's
been some nice dogs out there and some nice recognition on these dogs. So
quality is good. We've still got some of the real problems with bull terriers have had for day one, and that is on bites. We seem to get them right for a while, and then we regress, both on the canines and the incisors. But in terms of the quality of heads, the conformation of the dog and how well it's put together. It's a one-piece dog. The movement is pretty reasonable. So the breed's in good shape.
Good. It's nice to hear. Like I've seen a couple dogs. We don't have a huge population up here, but we do get an entry, and there's been some really quality dogs, in my opinion, that have come out and done well at the shows. So
yeah. Well, for many years, bull terrier people never stayed for the group because they were never placed in it. And so why?
That's starting to change.
Yeah, that is. Good to talk with you, Will.
Well, thank you, David. It's great to catch up with you, and it's great to see you. And I hope we catch up some other time as well.
Probably will. Goodbye.
Told you it was a great interview. Thank you, David, for giving us your time. I know it wasn't easy setting up, but I'm glad we got it done. And if you like what you see here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. And I'll see you down the road.